the ahadith are a different type of revelation. The ahadith are a revelation. We believe that the Prophet's ahadith are a type of wahi. Because Allah says in Surah Al-Najm, He does not speak of His own desires. Rather, it is from Allah. وَمَا يَنْتَقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Right? And in Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah says, قَدْ أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Allah has given you the kitab and hikmah. No, that's in Surah Al-Nisa. In Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاذْكُرْنَ مَا يُتْلَى فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. The wives are told, remember what was recited in your houses. The wives of the Prophet are told, remember what is recited in your houses from the ayat of Allah and the hikmah. Therefore, there's something being recited in the Prophet's house other than the ayatullah, and that is, what else is being recited? The sunnah, the hadith, right? So Allah calls the hadith hikmah. And Allah says anything that He says is the truth. And the Prophet ﷺ himself said, nothing comes from here except the truth from Allah. The Prophet ﷺ is not allowed to say anything that is false. And therefore, we believe it is a type of wahi, but the wahi that he has is a very different type of wahi than the Quran. The Quran is inspired in wording and meaning. The actual love comes from Allah. The alfaz are inspired by Allah and recited. But the ahadith, the meanings can come from the Prophet, but the concept comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So there is a difference between Quran and hadith in that the ahadith are not wordings from Allah. This is the process of speaking as a human being. But his speech will be divinely protected as a prophet. The Quran is coming, it's tilawa, it's from Allah. And Allah is reciting it. And therefore it has a station that is more sacred than hadith. The word hadith has and sunnah has many meanings depending on how you use it. When we use it as the scholars of the seerah or the scholars of the sunnah, a hadith is every single statement of the Prophet ﷺ. Every statement of the Prophet ﷺ is a hadith. Therefore, whatever he said is a hadith. Even his jokes, ﷺ, even his jokes, and he did crack jokes, by the way. Our Prophet ﷺ cracked jokes. He had a sense of humor. And there are many stories, inshallah, one day I might give a lecture about the humor of the Prophet ﷺ. Even his jokes are statements of fact. We derive aqeedah and fiqh and adab from his jokes, right? I mean, you all know the famous joke of the old lady, right? Yes. The old lady. It's a theological point that we derive. All people will not enter Jannah. They're all going to be young. It's a joke he cracked at the old lady, that old ladies are not going to enter Jannah, right? And the old lady started wailing and crying and goes, Ya amatah, oh my dear mother, yes, old ladies are not going to enter Jannah. Allah will cause you to become a young lady, then cause you to enter Jannah, right? It's a theological point of benefit that we derive. And fiqh as well, and other things that we derive. The famous hadith that the Prophet was on his deathbed, and Aisha fell sick as well on his deathbed. Aisha had a fever as well, right? And she began complaining about her head, and she felt she's about, she's a young girl, she felt she's about to die or something. And so the Prophet is joking with her and saying, what is the matter with you if you die? Why are you worried? You're going to be so fortunate and blessed that I'm going to wash your... He knows he's about to die, by the way. So he's cracking jokes on his deathbed to make the mood easier for Aisha to bear, right? And so he tells Aisha, if you die, even though he's about to die, if you die, alhamdulillah, I'll wash your dead body, right? And I'll pray over you, and I'll, give you dafn. I mean, what more can you want, right? So he's joking with his wife. And then, of course, Aisha replies, I'm sure you're waiting for that day, because then you won't have anybody between you and your other wives, right? Because Aisha was the main barrier. She was the one, mashallah, controlling the Prophet in this matter, right? And so from this we derive the fiqhi perspective point, which, by the way, our culture does not agree with, the Hanafi culture, but the fiqhi point, husbands can wash the bodies of their wives and vice versa. Because he clearly said, I would wash your body, right? And pray over you and whatnot. So we derive a fiqh from this joke. That, there's a cultural thing, the nikah breaks. This is not true at all. It's just a cultural thing. And the husband cannot... This is clearly in Sahih Bukhari hadith. So everything that comes from the Prophet is a hadith. No questions about that. As for the difference between Quran and hadith Qudsi, the strongest opinion seems to be that The only difference is that Hadith Qudsi has not been preserved in wording. It was revealed in wording, but it has been preserved in wording. And so the same Hadith Qudsi, we find it in many different wordings. Bukhari might have one wording, Muslim might have another. So the Hadith Qudsi have been narrated by meaning, just like the other Ahadith, but the Quran has not been narrated by meaning. The Quran has only been narrated by words. Actual words has been narrated. So that's the main difference between Quran and Hadith Qudsi.